The movie opens with a mother and her young daughter Katrina boarding a plane. Early into the flight, turbulence shakes the cabin, scaring little Katrina. Her mother comforts her, reassuring her it's just a normal bump in the sky, and gently encourages her to get some rest. Katrina falls asleep, only to be jolted awake moments later by screaming passengers. The plane is violently shaking, and someone is crying out for help. Her husband Yevgeny has just died mid-flight. Remember that name. It will matter later. Katrina desperately searches the plane for her mother, but she's nowhere to be found. When she looks behind her, she sees an old woman muttering in an eerie, incomprehensible language. The woman's eyes suddenly turn completely white, terrifying Katrina. Moments later, the plane crashes. Everyone dies, except Katrina. Now limping through a forest with a metal brace on her leg from a past injury, Katrina is the sole survivor. 20 years later, Katrina is still alive and seemingly living a normal life. A journalist interviews her and her young daughter Diana. Katrina explains she's no longer afraid of flying, and she's finally put the traumatic crash behind her. That day, they're headed on a flight to visit Katrina's father. But when asked what still haunts her, she admits, the sound of metal scraping. It reminds her of the brace she once wore, and the nightmare she lived through. That night, Katrina and Diana board their flight. The plane is almost empty, something Diana finds odd. Katrina explains that bad weather caused most other flights to be cancelled. Soon, a man named Alexei sits near them and strikes up a friendly conversation. But then, another couple boards the plane, Galina and Yevgeny. Yes, the same name as the man who died 20 years ago. Galina is terrified of flying, so Katrina, who now works as a psychologist, comforts her and gives her a calming pill. As Katrina returns to her seat, she begins to hear a metal scraping noise, and panic creeps in. She heads to the lavatory to calm herself, but once inside, something inexplicable happens. She hears her mother calling her name. When she opens the bathroom door, she's no longer on the plane, she's in her childhood home. Her mother's voice leads her to a room. When she opens the door, she's suddenly back on the plane. Shaken, she takes another pill and returns to her seat. Alexei notices the medication and asks if she's okay. Diana explains that her mother survived a terrible plane crash as a child. Katrina is visibly upset and cuts the conversation short. As everyone else on the plane falls asleep, something eerie happens. The cabin turns blood red, and ghostly, blood-stained handprints appear on the windows. No one notices, everyone is still asleep. Katrina slips into a disturbing dream. She's sitting at a table with her mother, peacefully eating. But across the room, she sees a distorted version of her mother, twisted, staring wrong. Frightened, Katrina asks her real mother how she's even there, since she died in the crash years ago. Her mother gets angry and her eyes turn white, just like the old woman from Katrina's childhood flight. Katrina jolts awake. Back in the real world, the plane is shaking again, severe turbulence. Galina begins to panic, and suddenly, her husband Yevgeny dies. Katrina rushes to help, trying to revive him, but fails. Then, Yevgeny's eyes turn white. He grabs Katrina and mutters strange, unintelligible words before collapsing again. Katrina, horrified, looks toward the back of the plane, and sees a dark figure lurking. Shadowy. Almost inhuman. Shaking, she tells Alexei about the woman she saw 20 years ago. An old, witch-like lady muttering spells right before the crash. And now, it seems, the nightmare is happening all over again. Katrina becomes convinced that the witch from the past is back, and this time, she's inside the plane, trying to finish what she started 20 years ago. Katrina believes the witch intended to kill everyone on that doomed flight, and now that Katrina survived, she's come back to finish her off. Alexei, however, doesn't believe her. He tries to calm her down, explaining that the medication she's taking is known to cause hallucinations. Maybe everything she's seeing is just in her head. Offended, Katrina walks away and sits back with Diana. Moments later, Alexei approaches again, trying to make peace. He opens up, revealing that 5 years ago, while working as a journalist, he was trapped under rubble in a deadly building collapse. Everyone else died, but he survived. During recovery, he was prescribed the same pills Katrina has. He started seeing things too. That's why he said what he did. Katrina softens, and they reconcile. But things quickly turn strange again. Diana suddenly looks up at her mother and begs her not to leave her. Katrina is confused. Why would she say that? Diana replies that a little girl sitting behind them told her Katrina was going to disappear. Alarmed, Katrina turns around, only to see a dark figure dash past the aisle. She jumps to her feet to chase it, but there's no one there. Back in her seat, Diana tells her the girl said her mother would vanish once the man named Nikolai seated at the front, burns. Katrina is startled. She turns and sees Nikolai lighting a cigarette. She rushes to stop him, but it's too late. The lighter sparks, there's a burst of flames, and his body is engulfed. The fire is put out, but Nikolai is badly burned and barely alive. He asks to see his phone, just one last glimpse of his family photos. As he stares at them through teary eyes, he dies. A silent, emotional moment falls over the cabin. Then Katrina notices something. Galina I. She remembers seeing her go into the lavatory earlier. Concerned, she walks toward the back, but two flight attendants block her path, claiming they'll handle it. Katrina grows suspicious of them, but continues on. She opens the lavatory, and finds it completely empty. Galina has vanished. As Katrina turns back, she notices Yevgeny's corpse, and suddenly, he comes alive like a zombie grabbing her arm. She screams, and in that instant, the black ghostly figure appears again, grabbing her head from behind. She thrashes, terrified, but then, everything vanishes. The ghost is gone. Katrina, more panicked than ever, grabs Diana and tries to flee. Alexei stops her, trying to reason with her. You're still on a plane, Katrina. You can't just walk out. But before he can finish, blood begins pouring from his nose and eyes. Katrina is horrified and pulls away with Diana. As they approach the front cabin, the flight attendants stop them. We're trying to protect you, they say. Protect me from what? Katrina demands. One attendant starts to answer, but suddenly begins choking, water pouring from her mouth as if she's drowning. She collapses and dies. Katrina is frozen in fear. Meanwhile, the mysterious passenger Pavel, the artist, sits quietly sketching the dead flight attendant. Katrina realizes he's been drawing her all along. She snatches his sketchbook and flips through the pages, and is stunned. He's drawn every passenger, each one dying in the exact way they just did. Panicked, she demands, "Who are you?" But before she gets an answer, Pavel bursts into flames and turns to ash. Now, only Katrina, Diana, Alexei, and one remaining flight attendant are left alive. Still desperate to escape, Katrina drags Diana to the plane's main door and tries to open it. Alexei and the attendant stop her, pleading for her to calm down. But just then, the flight attendant is violently dragged backward by an unseen force. Alexei starts bleeding again, from his eyes, his skull, until he collapses dead. Katrina has no choice. She opens the plane door, but finds herself still on the plane. She opens it again. Same thing. No matter what she does, she's trapped in an endless loop inside the aircraft. Suddenly, the black ghost appears one last time. But this time, something emerges from inside it. It's her, Katrina as a child. We're transported back in time. Little Katrina is on the plane, 20 years ago. The witch sits behind her, whispering, "You're still a child. This is the moment your plane crashes. Everyone is dying. I placed you in a dream, a false life, to shield you from the pain. Everything you've seen, all those passengers, were part of that illusion. But now, you've realized this isn't real. So it's time to wake up." The truth is heartbreaking. Katrina never survived the crash. She was just a child during the accident, and the witch, far from being evil, tried to protect her by placing her soul in a magical illusion. A fantasy world, to spare her from experiencing death consciously. But Katrina fought through it. She wanted to know the truth. And so, she wakes up. She's back on the crashing plane, still a child. Around her, passengers lie dead, just as she saw in her visions. The plane has crash-landed by the ocean. Katrina is sitting alone in part of the wreckage, next to her mother, who is bleeding and dying. But miraculously, Katrina survives. She is the sole survivor once again. The illusion ends. The nightmare is over. And this time, it was real. If you enjoyed this recap, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more thrilling stories every week. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next mystery flight. Movie Camera Airplane. See you in the next recap.